In the heart of Frankfurt's Jewish ghetto, behind the sign of a red shield, Rothschild, in German, a family would emerge that would reshape the financial landscape of Europe and the world. This is the story of how five brothers built the most powerful banking dynasty in history, financing wars, toppling governments, and becoming synonymous with wealth itself. But this isn't just a story about money. It's about survival, innovation, and how one family navigated the dangerous waters of European politics, anti-Semitism, and revolution to create an empire that still exists today. Our story begins in 1744 in one of the most restrictive and oppressive places in Europe, the Judengasse, or Jews' Alley, of Frankfurt, Germany. The Judengasse was a narrow, crowded street where Frankfurt's Jewish population was forced to live, locked in at night and on Sundays and Christian holidays. Jews couldn't own land, enter most professions, or marry without permission from Christian authorities. Only a limited number of Jewish families were allowed to exist in Frankfurt at any given time. Into this world was born Mayer Amschel, who would later take the name Rothschild from the red shield that hung outside his family's house. His father was a moneylender and trader in silk and other goods, one of the few occupations available to Jews. When Mayer was young, his parents hoped he would become a rabbi. He studied at a yeshiva, showing intellectual promise. But when both his parents died in a smallpox epidemic, 13-year-old Mayer had to abandon his religious studies and learn the family business. This was a turning point. Mayer apprenticed at a banking house in Hanover, where he learned the intricacies of finance and, crucially, developed a passion for collecting rare coins. This hobby would open the door to his future. In the 1760s, Mayer returned to Frankfurt and began dealing in rare coins and antiques. His big break came when he heard that Prince William of Hanau, an avid coin collector, Mayer carefully curated a collection and secured an audience with the prince. The meeting was a success. Prince William became a client, and more importantly, Mayer earned the title Crown Agent to the Prince of Hesse-Hanau, a designation that gave him credibility and opened doors throughout Europe. But Mayer's true genius wasn't in coin dealing. It was in recognizing opportunity. When European nobles needed loans to fund their lavish lifestyles and endless wars, Mayer was there. When governments needed to move money discreetly, Mayer had a solution. Mayer Amschel married Ghetto in 1770, and together they had 10 children who survived to adulthood, 5 sons and 5 daughters. And here's where the Rothschild strategy became revolutionary. Mayer sent his 5 sons to establish banking operations in 5 major European cities. Amschel stayed in Frankfurt, Salomon went to Vienna, Nathan moved to London, Karl established himself in Naples, and James headed to Paris. Think about what this meant. In an era before telephones, before telegraphs, the Rothschilds created a private intelligence and financial network spanning the continent. They could move money, share information, and coordinate strategies faster than any government. Each brother was instructed to marry within the Jewish community, often to cousins, to keep the wealth and business secrets within the family. This wasn't just about tradition. It was about trust and security in a world that was often hostile to Jewish success. The family motto was simple: Concordia, Integritas, Industria, Harmony, Integrity, Industry. But they might as well have added another: information is power. The most successful of the brothers was Nathan, who moved to Manchester, England, in 1798 at age 21. He started as a textile merchant, but quickly pivoted to banking in London. Nathan was bold, aggressive, and brilliant, some said ruthless. Nathan established the London Bank that would become the family's powerhouse. He had an uncanny ability to predict market movements and wasn't afraid to make huge, leverage bets. His competitors both feared and respected him. A contemporary described Nathan standing in his usual spot at the London Stock Exchange, hand in his pockets, giving orders with subtle movements of his head and eyes. He dominated the market. But the event that truly made the Rothschild fortune was the Napoleonic Wars. Between 1803 and 1815, Europe was engulfed in conflict as Napoleon Bonaparte attempted to conquer the continent. Wars are expensive. Governments needed enormous amounts of money to pay soldiers, buy weapons, and move supplies. The Rothschilds became the financial architects behind the scenes. When Britain needed to pay subsidies to its allies and fund the Duke of Wellington's army, fighting in Spain and Portugal, traditional banking channels were too slow or blocked by Napoleon's naval blockades. The Rothschilds devised an ingenious solution. Using their network across Europe, they moved gold and currency through a complex web of transactions, circumventing Napoleon's continental system. Nathan would buy gold in London, brothers in Paris and Frankfurt would coordinate transfers, and the money would reach Wellington's troops, sometimes going through enemy territory. The British government was amazed. The Rothschilds could do what entire governmental departments could not. And then there's the most famous Rothschild legend, one that's been told and retold, embellished and distorted, but contains a kernel of truth. On June 18, 1815, Napoleon faced Wellington at Waterloo in Belgium. The outcome would determine the future of Europe. In London, traders waited anxiously for news. Whoever knew the result first could make a fortune on the stock market. The legend says that Nathan Rothschild used carrier pigeons and fast courier boats to receive news of Wellington's victory before anyone else in London, possibly a full day ahead of official channels. According to the story, Nathan then stood at the stock exchange and began selling British government bonds, consols, creating the impression that Wellington had lost. Panic selling ensued. The price of consols plummeted. Then, at the perfect moment, Nathan's agents began buying up these bonds at rock-bottom prices. When the official news arrived that Wellington had won, the bond prices soared, and the Rothschilds made an astronomical profit. How much of this is true? Historians debate the details. Nathan definitely had superior information networks. He definitely profited from Waterloo. But the dramatic scene of deliberate market manipulation may be exaggerated. What's not disputed is this. After Waterloo, the Rothschild were the dominant banking force in Europe. In the decades following Napoleon's defeat, the Rothschilds reached heights of power that are hard to imagine today. They weren't just bankers. They were effectively financial advisors to governments, with influence over international policy. The Rothschilds pioneered the international bond market. When governments needed money, they would issue bonds, essentially IOUs promising to pay back the loan with interest. The Rothschilds would underwrite these bonds, guaranteeing the loan, and then selling the bonds to investors across Europe. They financed the British government's purchase of the Suez Canal shares from Egypt in 1875, a crucial strategic asset. They funded the construction of railroads across Europe. They helped stabilize currencies and prevent financial panics. Their power was such that one Austrian minister reportedly said, "There is only one power in Europe, and that is Rothschild." After Napoleon's defeat, European leaders met at the Congress of Vienna to redraw the map of Europe. Salomon Rothschild was there, not as an official delegate, but as the man financing several governments represented at the table. The brothers were eventually granted titles of nobility by Austria's emperor, an extraordinary achievement for a Jewish family. They became barons, though they never forgot their origins or abandoned their faith. With wealth came spectacular displays of it. The Rothschilds built palaces and grand estates. They collected art on a scale rivaling royalty. They entertained kings, queens, and prime ministers. Waddesdon Manor in England, Château de Ferrières near Paris. These weren't just homes. They were statements of arrival. The Jewish family from the Frankfurt Ghetto now lived like princes. But they also used their wealth for good. The Rothschilds were major philanthropists, funding hospitals, schools, and housing for the poor. They supported Jewish communities across Europe and advocated for Jewish emancipation and civil rights. Success on this scale inevitably breeds resentment, criticism, and conspiracy theories. The Rothschilds became targets of anti-Semitic propaganda that, tragically, continues to this day. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the Rothschilds were accused of secretly controlling governments, starting wars for profit, and manipulating the world economy. These accusations played into ancient anti-Semitic tropes about Jewish control of finance. These conspiracy theories intensified as nationalist movements grew across Europe. The Rothschilds, with their international network and Jewish identity, were portrayed as rootless cosmopolitans loyal only to money. The reality was more complex. Yes, the Rothschilds were immensely wealthy and influential, but they were also vulnerable, operating in societies that, at best, grudgingly tolerated Jewish success and, at worst, actively persecuted Jews. By the late 19th century, the Rothschilds also faced increasing competition. American banking houses like J.P. Morgan and German banks like Deutsche Bank challenged their dominance. The financial world was evolving, becoming more corporate and less dynastic. The Rothschilds had built their empire on personal relationships, family networks, and discretion. The new era demanded different skills: mass marketing of stocks, closer ties with industrial corporations, and adaptation to faster communication technologies. Some Rothschild branches adapted better than others. The London and Paris houses remained powerful, while Frankfurt and Vienna gradually diminished in importance. The 20th century brought catastrophic challenges. The First World War disrupted international finance and pitted Rothschild branches on opposite sides of the conflict: London and Paris against Vienna and Frankfurt. The war's aftermath saw revolutions, hyperinflation in Germany, and the rise of totalitarian ideologies. The Rothschilds' multinational Jewish identity made them prime targets. When Hitler came to power in 1933, the Austrian Rothschilds faced existential threat. After Nazi Germany annexed Austria in 1938, Baron Louis von Rothschild was arrested and held for ransom. The Nazis demanded the Rothschilds' steelworks and other Austrian properties in exchange for Louis's freedom. After over a year in detention, a deal was reached and Louis escaped to America. The Rothschild properties were seized, their art collections looted. The Vienna house was destroyed. The Rothschild name was used in Nazi propaganda as a symbol of supposed Jewish financial conspiracy. Family members fled across the world, scattering the dynasty that had once seemed invincible. After the war, the surviving branches, primarily London and Paris, had to rebuild. They recovered some seized assets, reclaimed some artworks, and re-established banking operations. But the world had changed. The post-war financial system was dominated by American institutions. The age of great family banking dynasties was ending, replaced by large corporations and regulatory frameworks that constrained the kind of operations the Rothschilds had pioneered. So what happened to the Rothschilds? The family still exists, and they're still in banking, but in a very different way. Rothschild and Company, the family's financial advisory and banking business, operates today as a mid-sized but prestigious institution. They specialize in mergers and acquisitions, wealth management, and financial advice to corporations and governments. They're no longer the titans they once were. They can't compete with J.P. Morgan Chase or Goldman Sachs in terms of size. But they maintain a reputation for discretion, quality advice, and historical continuity. For certain clients, especially European old money and family-owned businesses, the Rothschild name still carries weight. Various family members have branched into different fields. Some remain in finance, others in wine production. Chateau Lafite Rothschild is one of the world's most prestigious vineyards, conservation, and philanthropy. Unfortunately, the Rothschild name remains a fixture in conspiracy theories and anti-Semitic propaganda. Internet conspiracy theorists claim they control the world's central banks, manipulate global events, and are worth $500 trillion. These claims are absurd. While the Rothschilds are certainly wealthy, various family members have fortunes in the hundreds of millions or low billions. They're nowhere near the richest people in the world. They don't control governments or orchestrate world events. These conspiracy theories tell us more about persistent anti-Semitism than about the actual Rothschild family. So what is the real Rothschild legacy? The Rothschilds pioneered international finance as we know it. They created the infrastructure for moving capital across borders, developed the modern government bond market, and demonstrated the power of information networks. They showed that a family could leverage trust, coordination, and financial expertise to wield influence rivaling nation-states. They proved that financial capital could be a form of power as significant as military might. And they did all of this while facing discrimination, persecution, and eventually genocide, yet somehow surviving as a family and institution across centuries of tumultuous European history. From a crowded ghetto in Frankfurt to palaces across Europe, from financing Napoleon's enemies to advising governments in the modern era, the Rothschild story is ultimately about adaptation, resilience, and the complex relationship between money and power. They weren't perfect. No dynasty is. They profited from wars and occasionally exhibited the arrogance that comes with generational wealth. But they also demonstrated remarkable business acumen, maintained strong family bonds across generations, and contributed significantly to the arts, sciences, and charitable causes. The Rothschilds built the most powerful banking empire in history, not through conquest or violence, but through information, trust, and an uncanny ability to be exactly where the money was moving. The empire they built may have shrunk from its 19th century heights, but the name Rothschild remains synonymous with finance itself, for better and, unfairly, sometimes for worse.